Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for waking up so early and being here and joining us to talk about such exciting topics such as the future of air travel. I'm Helena Lisachuk. I lead IoT practice at Deloitte, and I have an absolute pleasure to moderate this exciting panel. So, to start, my dear panelists, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Helena. Good morning, everybody. My name is Anis Hodzic. I'm from Airbus Digital Transformation Office. And I have the pleasure of at Airbus to lead the Internet of Things initiatives across the group.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Glenn Schnieders from Brussels Airport Company. I'm the product manager IoT, and I'm trying to help, together with my colleagues, make Brussels Airport one of the smartest airports in the world.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Tansier. I'm with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Just real quickly, how many in the room, when you travel, most favorite experience is going through immigration and customs? Raise your hand. Oh, I have one. Perfect. Good. All right. I'm going to take notes later. Obviously, I'm here today to talk a little bit about how travel is impacted by government, border controls, and how we are working towards making the passenger journey better through technology.
My name is Mahesh Chandramali. I'm part of the U.S. Consulting IoT practice. I'm here to talk about all about airlines because I fly all the time. I'm up in the air. How to make a customer journey more seamless experience as part of and leveraging IoT and advanced technologies. That's what I'm going to talk about.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I expect to have quite a lovely conversation because I think we have few nods of this very complex ecosystem of air travel covered right here. So we'll solve all the world's problems. So to start, why air travel and why IoT? Right, so we talk about the passenger and we'll come to that, but where is the connection, right? So if I may, shall we play the movie?
Yeah, let's
yes.
try.
All right, let's do that. Can we have a movie, please?
In today's world of aerospace, every product consists of thousands of parts provided by hundreds of suppliers. Maintenance services monitor the health of every aerospace product via thousands of onboard sensors. When a sensor signals dysfunction, an operator is alerted. Most of the time, the issue is quickly fixed with the original equipment manufacturer's help. But when the problem affects several systems, it's nearly impossible to quickly find and fix the root cause. Data exists at every stage of a product's life cycle, from any supplier's information to the latest test, back to the design office or the assembly line. Airbus linked up with the global big data specialist Palantir, beginning in its own factories. Together they created Skywise, a highly effective management platform which offers a single access point to share information, conduct data analysis, and enable informed decision-making and collaboration throughout the whole chain. Imagine what's possible for suppliers with wider access to Airbus data, powerful analytics for informed decision-making. For airlines, solving complex problems no longer means endless exchanges that take months or even years. For operators and suppliers, connecting operations data to a dedicated and secured platform means seamless access to data, expertise, and analytics insight. Inquiries are shortened from years to weeks, from months to days, or even hours, with dramatic cost savings. Failures are anticipated before they actually occur. The smooth operational flow generates huge savings and happy customers. With Skywise, the operator's exact needs are finally at the heart of the design for future products and service solutions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So this is just a little bit of a view into the future, and we'll continue talking about that. So you saw some interesting futuristic-looking aircrafts and Airbus of the future. So let's talk a little bit. Where are the aircrafts going? Is there like specific trend or a specific direction? What should we expect?
Thanks, Elena. Basically, what you see, what you saw in this video, which is available for all of you guys. So if you like it, also let me know. We see that even in airspace as an industry, which was until now not really open industry, we use data also to provide a new experience. First of all, also for the passengers, and then also for all players in the industry. If we start with the passenger, what we see in the next also 20 years, so the scenario today is 2040, we see actually the doubling of the fleets. So basically the fleets that we have today in the world will be doubled around in next 15 years. So we are talking about additional 39,200 aircrafts until 2039 from our perspective, which is huge. And if you take a look at why is this coming, we see a strong developments in the mega cities. So from 66 official mega cities a couple of years ago, we will have like 95 in 2039, and really mega cities which were not on the stage of today. And what we see as a need also there is the overall actually optimization of the flying experience, of the landing experience, of the airport experience, and we need some new solutions. New solutions in terms of self-flying, because what we see is we have already today a shortage of the pilots, and where we as Airbus are investing a lot also these days are the self-flying aircrafts. You will probably say in the past there's a lot of aircrafts were self-flying anyway, but they were not self-landing and self-starting. So we will have that also anytime soon, probably in the next decade. And the next big topic is if you have even more of the traffic in the air, it needs to be cleaner, it needs to be less noisy. So we see next decade the electric aircraft also coming with different also facets. Although there would be, from our perspective, a silver bullet also for electrification of the planes, but we will see also a couple of technologies, hopefully also in next 20 years coming together to the powerful of the platform. Last but not least, also we see emergence in these mega cities of something which we call urban air mobility. So it does not have to be 100 passengers, 500 passengers, maybe 1 or 2 passengers or even 4, self-flying. And this is the big topic also where we are actually rediscovering the industry, redefining the industry, starting also from the aircraft, but more importantly today, the overall traffic also management needs to be also completely also revolutionized in order to deal with this kind of flying aircrafts or flying also taxis around us.
That's amazing. Wow. All right. So we need to land them somewhere, right? So let's take one of the flying aircrafts of the future to Glen. And is Brussels Airport ready?
Not yet today, but we'll be there in the upcoming years, and probably in 2040 will be the airport in Europe and hopefully also in the world. I'm very convinced of that. And what Anas said is of course self-flying aircraft, cleaner aircraft. We as an airport, and we are a city airport, Brussels. We are located really next to the city of Brussels. Of course, we are cheering to cleaner aviation, to quieter aviation. That's also what we do with tariffication. Every aircraft that lands at Brussels Airport has to pay some kind of, let's say, amount of money to land and operate at Brussels Airport. And cleaner and less quieter aircraft will pay a different tariffication than, let's say, an older aircraft. And that's why we as Brussels Airport are one of the driving force in Europe to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. So it's great to hear the kind of focus on emission control and greener and cleaner environment and less noise. But how are you seeing airport? Because you heard not just aircrafts, but flying taxis. Are you thinking about the airport as a city to some extent as well, or?
Yeah. We truly believe that an airport is like a city, and that's not only for passengers, but we also driving to get companies at our site. We are creating an airport business district. We have already Deloitte, we have Microsoft, we have KPMG already at our premise, and for them it's great that they can invite customers right at the airport and get them right at the office in 2 minutes. And we are already driving and really focusing on that in the next upcoming years to really drive and make a small city and a small ecosystem at our airport.
Well, and it's also a busy one, so was a lot of people coming in, arriving,
Yeah.
seamless experience. I'm looking at Dan. What is going on? How do you make our border crossing that you were sort of asking us about? And we do like the experience, but what are you doing to make it even easier and even more seamless?
Yeah, so I think one of the key drivers of the experience when you arrive in any country, of course, is how quickly you can get through. My concern, of course, is how secure that process is. But we're using biometric technology, face recognition, to make that journey as seamless as possible. And we can see where we could use face everywhere somebody shows a physical ID today. So if you've traveled, you know you show it to the airline when you check in. In fact, you actually type in all that information when you buy a ticket. We believe that we can match you to your travel document, your passport or your visa, and that's all we're doing. We're using Face to automate that process, and we think we can do that at multiple touch points throughout the airport. And I know Mahesh is going to talk a little bit more about on the domestic side, since I deal only with international travel, but I think there's more. I think we can communicate to travelers about what to expect before they even arrive at U.S. Customs and Border Protection through interconnected aircraft, through telling the traveler where the restrooms are, for example, or what lane to arrive when they see a CBP officer or customs officer. We think personalizing the journey, using face as the way to identify people, and then giving them personalized instruction is going to increase security, make it much, much, much better than it is today.
Well, I have to say, as a very frequent traveler, I kind of live on their aircraft, so let's make them more comfortable and the border crossing seamless and airports comfortable. I was just going through this biometric screening in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, and it took like, what, 2 seconds? You just kind of go through, you take a ticket, you move on, that's it, done.
Yeah, that's
It was very fast.
Yeah,
It was
rather
great.
than holding that passport and waiting for it to open and then looking at it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the technology really helps facilitate everything.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's now hear a little bit from the airline perspective. Mahesh,
Thanks, Elaine.
can you speak a little bit about what's latest and greatest on the domestic side happening with the airlines?
So I think it's airlines are making a ton of investment in this space, especially around the intersection of digital innovation, customer experience, and how do they make their operations more leaner and efficient. So what I wanted to talk about is one of the programs we are running with one of the major carriers in the U.S., where we are focusing on a concept called day of travel. So what we have is 48 hours before your trip, your travel plan gets created for you, and then the travel plan helps you to organize as a customer. Like when you wake up in the morning and you have a flight, it tells exactly what time you need to leave to catch your flight. It calculates all the time from the time you take the trip from your home to the airport. If you park your car, what's the time there? From there to if you check in a luggage, what's the time? And then what are the times in your wait time in the TSA as well as at the gate? And then once you go into the flight, how that journey changes, and then it goes all the way to the destination. So what we are bringing in is, as we are talking about the seamless customer experience, which is one part of the story, but there's also what we are doing is we're collecting all that customer data, and then we are basically trying to improve the turn time from an operations perspective. So we found, based on our analysis, that 1 to 4 minutes of saving turn times of an aircraft, it's in a multi-million-dollar savings for the airlines. So we are also looking at pushing the envelope, with IoT being the front and center of this transformational program. How do we track and how do we make sure that we provide a seamless experience to the customers and then in turn bring the operational efficiency?
Thank you, Mahesh. I want to kind of zoom in a little bit into the journey itself, because it feels like in the past couple of years, the definition of the journey is slightly changing, where it starts, where it ends. So, Glenn, where does a journey start for a passenger in your mind?
Just like you said before, a couple of years ago, not only in Brussels Airport, a lot of airports thought that the journey started at curb to curb. We use that terminology. When you arrive at the airport, then for us as an airport, the journey starts. Right now and also in the future, we're looking at door to door. For us, now as an airport, your journey starts at the door and perhaps on your couch. At your desk, your journey starts and not at the curb. And that should change. And we are using, together with airlines, but also with other partners, to help that cover that journey. And not just at the airport, but before and after.
Interesting. And that's what do you think? What's your perspective?
Basically, so what we see a kind of two big developments as of right now, that our customers and are becoming more kind of mobility providers, dealing also with different also mobility modes and really thinking about the journey also end to end. On the other side, also what we see is that the whole this digitalization and all the exponential technologies that we have around are reframing the journey. For example, if you take a look on the simple examples, so where you today, I mean, the old school of the generation could not imagine also not, to fly without luggage. But if you take a look in a kind of a little bit more disruptive also startups, so these days, also there are offerings where basically the guys are guaranteeing you that your luggage will be at the point also where you arrive, but you don't have to take care about, transition flights and everything else, which is quite interesting also for us. Because with this, we are kind of disconnecting passenger from the luggage, and this is, impacting also the weight distribution in the airplanes and efficiency of the airplanes in the end.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, makes perfect sense. Now I'm looking at Dan. I think he has something to say about separating luggage from the passenger. What is your perspective?
Well, first and foremost, I think, from a government entity, we used to be very concerned with what happens when you arrive in that international arrivals hall and when you leave, and nothing else was of concern necessarily for us. We didn't think about fundamentally what happens when you board the aircraft, or whether or not you had or had not luggage, or even those of you who arrive in the United States know that you have to pick up your bag, move it through customs, and then recheck it into your airline. We're now looking at, is it possible to get X-ray technology that will allow us to do that before you arrive or as you arrive, so you don't have to do that. So we're starting to open up our minds as a government agency about that passenger journey all the way back. It's quite a different shift in the way of thinking, as opposed to that, this is my hall, these are the rules in the hall, and that is that, versus now saying, well, how can we work with airlines and airports to maybe change up? Again, never really changing our security posture, but being smarter about how we tackle it.
Very interesting. What do you think the airlines could do different, Mahesh? To kind of, you just heard quite a few different extensions of the journey, very interesting ideas. What are airlines doing now? What do you think they should be doing?
So the airlines are already trying in terms of the journey perspective, in terms of data, right? So it's about, the data is coming from disparate systems, and the data sets are very disparate. So from an airline perspective, thinking about a luggage data, which you talked about, like as a customer, I look at my phone and say like, hey, where is my luggage, whether my luggage made the connection or not, if I have a connection, right? So that data is an integral part of it, but at the same time, that same data is also used for the operational side of it too. So it's if you think about the ecosystem players here is very key, because you have airports, you have airlines, you have third party, which is also coming in, because like Lyft and Uber, like how do we make that extension of when you exit the airport, how do you make that extension too, right? So giving that data, and 4 is also data for the airport specific to the retailers. Like, so you go and sit in the gate, and then you're there, and then how do you make sure that you engage with the retail shops there within the airport? So it's got different perspective of how, and then it all ties to the journey of the customer, which is what we've been talking about.
Please.
Maybe if I may add, I mean, we're discussing a lot of data, but what we see today is actually we have the system where we are kind of moving also today is quite data rich, but it's quite siloed. So I think in the first step also, if we can ensure to start sharing also this data, to getting the data out of the silos, we are already in a good mood. And from our perspective, our learning is actually this can only happen if all of these different also stakeholders in the ecosystem align around the joint value proposition. And actually, if you take a look on digitalization activities in all companies and in other industries, if we start with the value proposition, which is new for the passenger, for the customer, I think that we can figure it out also how to deal even with the existing data.
I love the idea. Glenn, please.
Also on an airport level, what we saw before is that we had competition. Like Brussels Airport has a lot of competition with Schiphol, we have Heathrow and so on. And in the past, we were fighting against each other about flights, about passengers. Right now, we're working together. We have come up with a great platform, AOP, Airport Operations Platform, where we ingest all the data from all the airports, working together with them. So if there are problems in a European airspace, we know it up front. They know how much space there is left at Brussels. We know how much space there is left at Schiphol. So we can help each other, and it's going to be a benefit from us all, for the passenger, but also for an airline, for a manufacturer, for all, it's going to be a huge benefit.
Please.
Yeah, I think the other part of this too that's sometimes forgotten when there's a problem in the airspace due to weather or anything, the government agencies are sometimes forgotten. And so there's nothing more frustrating, I think, to a passenger to have been diverted, only to find that there are no customs officers or immigration officers available to help get them off the plane and into a more comfortable setting. So I think that exchange of operational data is really a best practice that many of us could benefit from. And we in the federal government need to be in tune to that, I think, in order to make sure that that whole process is working. The other thing I'll just note, too, is as we talk about data, talk about the passenger journey, one of the things that comes to my mind as a government bureaucrat up here, of course, is data protection, data privacy. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but those are some of the key topics that resonate for me in that space.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Mahesh, please.
So it's come to the key point, like who owns the data, right? So that's the key point too. So in order for us, because there's certain barriers like regulatory, data privacy, which you talked about, legal, which you talked about, and then also border protection, right? So these things needs to be in a conglomerate that owning the data is going to be, data needs to be shared to provide, at the end of the day, you're providing the seamless air travel for the customers. So how do we make that is very important.
Please.
But maybe just one quick reaction on that. When you do all these digital transformations, and what we see is actually in the beginning, although when the people are probably not really mature for a kind of new digital models, they want to own everything also which they are basically acquiring and generating. Until somebody from the board asks, so what do we do with this all of this data? And what we see there is, the whole discussion also from owning the data is becoming the discussion of using the data. So in the meanwhile, also what we see as a kind of sign of the digital maturity is this openness also to share the data, protecting also all relevant rules and personal data and regulations. But I think also what we need more, if we really want to generate a new value, is a kind of decentralized handling of the data and sharing of the data.
That's interesting. I think when we think about that over in the States, is who is that decentralized handler of the data? I think we have a great model in what we're doing in the United States specific to face recognition. Subject to debate and personal opinion on whether the government's the right broker for that, but we are handling the face matching for our entry and exit in a centralized way. So airlines and airports don't have to collect or have to handle biometric data. Now, that's just as one example of a model that could work, I think, going forward.
Okay, very, very, very interesting. So we are touching the data topic, we are touching the collaboration topic, the ecosystem topic, some pretty difficult concepts. But, maybe this audience would like to hear about some of the successes, right? So either in data sharing or data exchanges, or maybe applying some of the new technologies to make a journey of the passenger closer to the future and more enjoyable. Would you like to share one or two examples from kind of your experience? What already works? That's question number one. Mahesh, you'll go first. And the question number two, what do you think is one of the most major impediments to just kind of take us towards that future of air travel? So think about that one while Mahesh is talking about success story.
So I would talk about data from from a customer point of view, another from an operation point of view. One of the things which we have done is around progressive tracking of customers. So giving customers the just-in-time information at the right place at the right moment, because as you know that when you are in a travel, airport is the most messiest place. You are in a hurry, you wanted to get, you want to know where the gates are, what's happening. So providing that information and tracking, and we're also even thinking about to a level where like informing in such a way that, hey, you're not going to make the flight because we know that you're just going to pass the TSA. Let's rebook it for you because you're not going to make the flight. So getting that experience. And two is also, if you think about it, is right, weather is the biggest factor in terms of the operations, and data of weather data is very critical. So if you have a thunderstorms and you have things like that, what's happening is leveraging that data to understand how you can auto marshal, because the biggest problem is you go and sit in the flight many times and then you just wait because people can't get out in the tarmac to marshal the flight out. So thinking about auto marshaling type of technologies, which is evolving in the operations space, making that more seamless is a big factor, is what I would say.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I just want to react on the tracking. I guess everyone has another definition of tracking. A lot of our passengers has also another definition of tracking. But for me, the most important is that we step behind that word, further that word, and let's explain to the passenger why we need that kind of data. Why do we need to know where the location is? And for us as an airport, that's a safety perspective, of course. It's an operational reason behind it, but for me that's very important to just really explain to the passenger or customers why we need it, and not just track it and just not own the data.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the concept is a very interesting one. I mean, I would characterize it more as personalizing the journey. The value proposition for the traveler is your entire journey can be mapped out for you and fed to you as you go, giving you real-time updates. In the international context of arriving in the U.S., I want to be able to tell you exactly, what lane to go to. Welcome, Mr. Tansier. You'll report to lane 2. Officer Smith is waiting for you. I mean, could you imagine that kind of arrival experience?
I'd love it.
I mean, I think that would be great. And if you think about an example too, and I don't have a specific one, but I just want you to picture for a moment yourselves. Many of you are business travelers, have traveled with your family. You know what it's like. You have your hands full, usually a cup of coffee, a briefcase, a carry-on bag. You go to board the aircraft and you're trying to fumble to find what boarding pass you're supposed to have. But Face allows you just to walk up to the boarding agent. They know who you are, can tell you your seat number, and you can get on the airplane. Imagine if your preferences were saved in a privacy environment where the flight crew knew exactly what you like to drink. Imagine when you get to your onward destination, your Uber driver knows who you are, or even as you check into the hotel. Now, I realize that might sound frightening to some people from a privacy perspective, but I think if you think about it, you hand over those biographic pieces of information on your passport or ID today. At least with Face, you're not giving them your date of birth or your country of residence. They simply know that that's Dan, welcome to the hotel, and move on. So I think that's like sort of a success story in my mind, and then it all really ties together, I think, nicely in the journey. But
Definitely goes towards that value proposition, absolutely. Do you have a perspective or another idea for value proposition? Or elaborate on what Dan is saying, yes.
Yeah, I guess, the main thing is we really have to try to explain to the passenger why we need, I guess that's a great pitch, I guess. Perhaps we have to record that and use it for our passengers to show that. But that's for me the most important. Really try to explain why we need the data, why it's great for a passenger to know everything, why we need to know everything. That's something very important. I guess that's going to be one of the toughest things that we're going to do in the upcoming years in aviation industry.
Glenn, if I can just make one more point, though. I mean, if you think about the data that we're talking about, that data is almost provided today anyway. You have to book a ticket, so you know who you are. You have to know when that flight is leaving, so you have to know when you're arriving at the airport. So the bigger context here is we're simply putting together the pieces of the puzzle that already exist today, so that it makes your operations better, makes the flight better, maybe makes the design of the aircraft better, works well for the airlines, and again, from the government perspective, allows us to be better at processing people more efficiently. It's a hard thing to grasp, I know, but really a lot of the stuff we're talking about happens today already, is collected in some sort of form or fashion. It's just about putting it together in a maybe safer way so that it's more centralized.
Yeah, I mean, talking about value proposition and putting the passenger, I mean, one interesting story that we are kind of following and take a look is the overall the customer experience. So if we and really also starting also from the persona. So if we have a persona Helena, which is a business traveler flying a couple of millions miles a year, what we are finding out is, these guys are not really feeling good, and they are not really having a healthy life. So the question also would be how can the airplane as a kind of second space after your home could feel like home. I mean, why should you regret or why should you not use your Netflix account, Prime account, or whatever, your favorite music? And this is a kind of story that we are trying to drive, really coming from the personas, and these personas will impact the design of the environment and design of
This is
airplanes.
fantastic. When is this airplane going to be ready? Tomorrow?
Let me check with our forecasters.
Please,
That's the
please
next
do.
video.
Yes. Yeah. Let's make sure we could land it at Schiphol and at Brussels Airport. Yes. 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 So Glenn, you were saying something. Yes.
Yeah, but for me, and that's, I guess, also one of the key objectives is standardization.
Yeah.
Brussels Airport is, of course, the heart of Europe. We are in Europe. We have the US next to us. I work in the US. But standardization is very difficult. I have an example about the IATA Rule 753 about RFID on luggage. They are discussing it for almost 20 years, I guess. I guess last year or the beginning of this year, they said in 2020 or 2021, everyone should have it. But can you imagine that an airport in Africa, a small airport, will have RFID? I guess the answer will be no. So that's the big problem, standardization. And I guess we really have to start working on a global way in standardization and really start with a thing, really, and not discussing it and making a lot of big resolutions, but really start doing it.
So it's called for action, clearly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. All right.
So I think Dan is going to build a face app, I guess. So, but it's just coming back to the topic, how this facial recognition is going to change or revolutionize the travel. Because if you think about it, just not only at the customs and border protection, it's all about at the gate, as well as that if you go into the lounge and you are a million miner, you recognize the face recognize that it's John Doe, and if the experience changes completely. So it's just the way the centralized repository of that data, so that you have one spot where you go and authenticate and authorize that particular data, is very critical. And then working towards that ecosystem play is super important. And how do we work with the airlines and the airports?
And for me, what that does too is helps reduce the imposter threat. The fact that Mahesh may have dropped his passport, somebody may have decided that he looks like Mahesh and he's going to try to be Mahesh throughout the airport. This type of technology can help thwart that sort of threat in the air travel environment.
We can only have one Mahesh. Huh?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And as you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting this time as well, you mentioned the regulators and the standardization. I mean, these are just people as well. So we see, a big need also for the transformation in that area, actually taking the people where they are and explaining to them what is the potential. Because what we see on a global level, I mean, if you go to China's Shenzhen, and if you are basically also paying in a normal Alibaba store with your Alibaba 3D face recognition, and it's already also working. And if you combine it with the discussion that we had yesterday about openness for new technologies, the challenges of a kind of global players is how do you manage and consolidate this appetite in different markets on the global level with the whole standardization and security issues. that we have to face.
Absolutely, that's a true challenge. Kind of going back to the, since you brought it up, adapting the new technologies and being comfortable. We are all talking about the future in 2040, right? We are talking about some really interesting new technologies being used more and more, and it comes close to the passenger and the person. And I really like that many of you are talking about explaining, because one of the study outcomes from our kind of what impedes you from adopting new technologies is just because people are not aware, not fully familiar, don't understand the value. So I think that's proactive outreach and explaining how do you benefit as a person, how do you change. Technologies are changing us as well, right? So I believe it's very, very important. We're approaching towards the end of our session. Well, not there yet, but is there, are there any kind of topics that maybe you believe, we have like pillars of the ecosystem represented here, but are there any asks toward each other you have to kind of make this ecosystem collaboration tighter, more effective, take it forward for the benefit of the passenger, huh? Any thoughts, ideas?
Yeah, one of the key things is, and I'm repeating it myself, and I guess everyone already heard it from the panel, is I guess we as an airport has to stop being the biggest. Brussels Airport can't be bigger than Schiphol, can't be bigger than Heathrow in size, of course, but what we can do is trying to be the best. And that's what we're trying to do, and I also am going to ask you to Anis and to the other ones here. Of course, yeah, how is your look? I guess Airbus, yeah, the best, and
Yeah, I mean, what we see also these days is we have a kind of redefinition of the topic of ecosystem. For example, you saw the Skywise in the beginning, which is actually the open data platform. We have in the meanwhile also 100 airlines also being on this platform, just in terms of sharing the data and providing the same basis also for the innovation. On the other side, the question would be how do we benefit also from the broader ecosystem? Just to give you one example, I mean, these days we have a lot of startups and a lot of companies which have the best AI algorithms in the world. I think a couple of them are in the audience also today as well. Now, if you are a kind of big company or even a governmental organization, how would you decide who is really the best one?
Yeah.
So what we started to do, we started to do a kind of ecosystem of the crowdsourcing, having so-called challenges, AI challenges, where we are working with 500 companies across the globe. And you know what we're learning here is the best algorithms are not really coming also from our industries. They're coming also from really a kind of 3-team guys, somewhere from the spaces which we even don't know, and they are winning this kind of challenges. And I think this is something where we have really to redefine how we think the ecosystem and how we think and how we work with the best minds in the world.
Wow.
yeah, also from the beginning, a couple of months ago, we started working with Plug and Play Innovation Center from the US to help us, together with a lot of startups, in really really help us in making the future for Brussels Airport. So we're also taking the right steps towards that.
Interesting, and at least in the U.S., our DHS Science and Technology Directorate leads our engagement in Silicon Valley with those startups. We also work with Plug and Play and other small companies, and to the point where how do you know what's the best and what's the most accurate and what's the we want to continue to do that work too. We monitor all of our work in that space, but that's also why we too also have our officers who are in place, because at the end of the day, as great as this technology is, and I'm sure it's going to get better, the human still makes the decision. These are still tools for us to inform the decisions that we make, but the officer who you meet when you come into the U.S. is the one that ultimately decides who you are and whether you're coming into the States or not. So we look at this whole thing right now as a collection of tools, and continue to want to see it grow and become more effective.
So adding on to that, what from a concept perspective, we're looking at connected aircraft, connected airline, and connected airport. Like, how those three connected thing has to connect each other is a very critical thing. I think it's because everything is worked on silo in terms of connected, which works very well within the aircraft, very well within the airlines, very well within the airport. But how all three has to work together is an important topic. And the way you look at the future of travel, I want to make sure that when I go to a movie hall, how do my experience is? that's the same experience I want to get it when I'm a customer walking through the airport, getting to the flight, sitting on the aircraft and making my journey more memorable, right? So that is the topic which I would say that as we all have to focus in terms of how we think about 2040.
Wonderful. Completely agree with that. Absolutely. So we talked about the autonomous flying. We just have a few more minutes left. I do have to ask, how far is autonomous flying in terms of potential implementation landing? And from technology perspective, probably it's almost there, but from infrastructure perspective, is it ready, getting there? What are some of the barriers, and when can we expect it?
Maybe I can give some hints. What we've seen in area of autonomous flying, although we have, I think, right now more than 70 different other initiatives in this area. There are two perspectives. So the one perspective is actually a kind of vehicle, or let's call it vehicle. And the second topic is basically the management of the traffic, and the third topic is actually the infrastructure. So what we are learning also today as an industry is basically also how to deal with the traffic management in some specific other areas. We are learning a lot also from the drone trajectories and the delivery drones and everything else. So we have a couple of projects also in different regions. Technologically, on the vehicle part, the big topic is a battery, and the big topic is basically the propulsion, because if you compare it with automotive, for example, where the guys in the last 10, 15 years invested heavily in specific, batteries also for cars, we have this in front of us also in aviation. And what is interesting also there, we have a kind of different also kind of players also coming also together, which is quite good, because this diversity is bringing us on the next level. Probably if we stayed, closed in our kind of industrial verticals, also we will not go so fast as we are going today. And what we see, and I think this is something also in our discussion as well, is these days it's not really about big steps. It's more about baby steps. It's more about number of iterations. So the guys who can iterate fast will be probably the faster in the game of urban air mobility.
Wonderful. Yes. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and as an airport, what we can do to help manufacturers like Airbus, like Boeing, is to give data. Let's say if we're going to refurbish a new runway next year at Brussels Airport, why don't we put a lot of IoT sensors in it and share that data to the manufacturers? Right now, I guess only the A350 has a lot of sensors built on, but I guess if we have to wait up till the A320 family is equipped with lots of IoT sensors, that could take a couple of years. But if we can, as an airport, facilitate that with sharing data already today or next year, I guess that's going to be a huge benefit for all parties.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Well, so we discussed how the journey would look like, how the data can be shared, how your journey could be completely personalized, that you can do autonomous flying, you can do extremely comfortable, you can have very, very comfortable experience inside of the aircraft, and all the way from your house to your destination with seamless border crossing. So all of this requires probably people working together, right? And any kind of closing remarks from this wonderful audience? Anything you would like to share with the group? Is future of air travel far in terms of a horizon? It feels like it's in some instances it's closer than we think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's closer than we think too. In just my short time working in these projects, I've seen at least the government industry relationship improve significantly through partnership. And I think only by recognizing we're in this together, meaning the travelers, the manufacturers, the airports, the airlines, will we achieve a better travel experience. And I think it's very soon down the horizon.
Yeah, I guess the key message is collaboration. That's really the key message that we have to do in the upcoming years.
And I mean, also taking the perspective of the 2040 from today, for us it sounds like really best time of the industry, and really exciting of the journey with a lot of movements and chances also to develop and deliver.
That's very good to hear. Wonderful, Mahesh.
The key message I would say is around integrated data.
Yeah.
Like it's a very key message, because you have a lot of data. How do you take that data to information and insights is very critical, and the data cannot be siloed.
Yeah. All right. Okay. With this being said, I think we are closing our panel discussion. We have about 10 seconds for one question from the audience. If anybody has a question, please.
Thanks, Elena.
Yes.
Shyam from Oracle. Today, when we talk to airports, they say they act like basically the landlords and the telco provider, and the airlines make the decision. So, in your opinion, how will that change, where airlines will be incented to share more information? Today, they have competitive reasons to not even share the manifest of the people arriving for Dan to know how many foreigners are arriving versus, let's say, citizens to plan for immigration and so on.
Yeah, great question. And indeed, 10 years ago, I guess a lot of airports thought about we are landlords. We are renting out space, terminals to airliners, and so on. But today, we are more a customer-centric organization, and we really put the passenger and our customers in the middle of organization. That's a shift, and that means, of course, sharing data with all the parties. That's what we're going to do, and that's what we are also doing right now.
And just a quick note, in the U.S., it is required by law that all carriers share the manifest data with the border authorities. However, we don't get to then share that downstream either. We think there are other ways maybe to do that without having to share that specific passenger data. But
All right. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I would like for you to join me in a round of applause for great panelists. Thank you very much.